jail.
The hum of the Ferrari SF90's engine was a low, contented purr against the quiet backdrop of the late afternoon in Fairhaven. For Sheriff Anthony Reed, it was the most beautiful sound in the world, a symphony of long-overdue vindication. Years. 2 decades of navigating the labyrinthine corridors of justice, of walking the razor's edge between law and chaos, of sacrificing sleep, sanity, and sometimes even safety, for a community that often took his quiet dedication for granted. He wasn't one for grand pronouncements or ostentatious displays. His badge, worn smooth against his chest, spoke volumes enough that even a man of his quiet resolve had his breaking point, and subsequently his moment of triumph. The last case. It had consumed him, a months-long undercover operation that had coiled around his life like a python, squeezing tighter with each passing week. It wasn't just a local drug bust or a petty larceny. This was a multi-state human trafficking ring, deeply entrenched, with tendrils reaching into surprising corners of society. He'd lived and breathed the roles, the lies, the constant gnawing fear of exposure. He'd seen things that would haunt less hardened men, walked into situations that screamed peril, spent countless nights strategizing with his team, fueled by cold coffee and an unyielding sense of purpose. When the final arrests were made, the network dismantled and the victims rescued. A collective sigh of relief echoed not just through Fairhaven, but across the national news cycles that had tracked the intricate unraveling of the operation. It was a victory, hard-won, and deeply personal. The commendation ceremony had been a subdued affair, just the way Anthony liked it. No flashing lights or ticker-tape parades, just the quiet acknowledgement from his peers, the firm handshake from the mayor, and a deep, resonant pride in his wife Evelyn's eyes. Evelyn, his rock, his confidant, and a formidable deputy chief in her own right. She understood the silent battles, the emotional scars. When he'd told her he was thinking of finally, truly, spoiling himself, not with a fishing boat, not with a new tool shed, but with something utterly extravagant, she hadn't batted an eye. "You've earned it, Anthony," she'd said, her voice soft but firm every single mile of it. The Ferrari SF90 was more than a purchase. It was a physical manifestation of that earning. It wasn't about showing off. It was about acknowledging the cost of his dedication. The sleepless nights spent poring over case files, the missed family dinners, the adrenaline-fueled pursuits, the quiet moments of despair when a lead went cold. Every polished curve, every horsepower under its sleek hood represented a piece. Of himself, he'd poured into his calling. He'd spent weeks researching, reading reviews, agonizing over color choices, a cherry red, audacious, and unapologetic. The day it arrived, gently lowered from the transport truck onto his driveway. Sunlight glinting off its flawless paintwork, a genuine burdened smile had stretched across his face, a smile that hadn't come easily in years. He'd spent an hour just walking around it, touching the cool metal, inhaling the scent of new leather and high-octane triumph. It was his, legally, unequivocally, and fully paid for. A testament to 2 decades of unwavering service and undeniable success. He'd finally allowed himself a tangible reward for a life spent in quiet, relentless pursuit of justice. It was a symbol of every sleepless night. Every broken piece of a puzzle painstakingly reassembled, every inch of ground he'd fought to protect, solidified into a masterpiece of engineering, sitting proudly in his driveway, representing not just a car, but a career defined by integrity and sacrifice. The arrival of the Ferrari SF90 in Sheriff Anthony Reed's driveway marked a seismic shift in the carefully curated ecosystem of Fairhaven, particularly for one resident who saw herself as the undisputed sovereign of the neighborhood watch, Karen Sheila Peterson. The city clerk's assistant had once, in a moment of unguarded candor during a Rotary Club luncheon, described Karen as the neighborhood's self-appointed chief of psychological operations. It was a fitting, if slightly dramatic, assessment. For years, Karen had been a fixture perched on her meticulously manicured porch, a pair of binoculars almost permanently affixed to her face, a tall glass of iced tea sweating condensation. onto her pristine wicker table, and a reservoir of judgment flowing freely from her pursed lips. She was the first to notice a new car, the last to forget a misplaced lawn gnome. And the only person who genuinely believed the length of one's grass correlated directly with their moral standing. Anthony, a man of quiet observation himself, had always maintained a polite, if distant, relationship with Karen. He'd wave. She'd offer a tight-lipped nod, and life would continue its predictable rhythm. She'd occasionally report a suspiciously parked car or a child's skateboard. Left on the sidewalk, trivialities he and his department usually handled with a gentle, educational approach. But the cherry-red Ferrari was different. It wasn't just a new car. It was a beacon, a challenge, an affront to her carefully constructed world where success was earned quietly, modestly, and certainly not by a black sheriff on her street. No. Matter how decorated, the glares began almost immediately. On the first day, as Anthony carefully backed the new car into his driveway, he caught a reflection in the rearview mirror, binoculars lowered, jaw slack. The next day, the glares intensified, morphing into a calculated visual dissection from across the street. She'd pace her porch, seemingly watering her petunias, but her eyes, sharp as a hawk's, were fixed on the Ferrari. Her iced tea, usually a casual prop, became an anchor as she settled in for hours of surveillance. Anthony, accustomed to public scrutiny in his line of work, initially dismissed it as typical Karen curiosity, perhaps tinged with a dash of envy. He'd seen it before. People simply couldn't fathom a public servant, especially one of color, owning something so overtly luxurious. Then came the questions, whispered at first, then escalating into audible pronouncements to anyone unfortunate, enough to cross her path. Is that least? She'd ask Mr. Henderson from 2 houses down, her voice dripping with skepticism, as if a lease somehow made it less authentic, less earned. Did he borrow it from evidence for a joyride? She'd insinuate to Mrs. Rodriguez, her eyes wide with feigned concern, trying to plant seeds of doubt about his integrity. Her favorite, the one that truly grated on Anthony's nerves, was the thinly veiled accusation, delivered with a shake of the head and a sigh. I just don't know how someone like him could afford something like that. What? Is he selling drugs on? The side now, sheriff or no sheriff. She wasn't just questioning the car. She was questioning him. His character, his long-standing, impeccable record, his very right to possess something so valuable. Anthony, ever the professional, ignored her. He'd simply smile, tip his imaginary hat, and go about his business. He filled the Ferrari with premium fuel, detailing it on weekends, allowing himself the simple pleasure of an earned reward. He knew the rumors she was trying to spin, how she'd waylaid the FedEx driver to interrogate him about Anthony's financial habits, or cornered the neighborhood gardener to ask if he'd seen anything suspicious about the sheriff's spending. It was annoying, a buzzing fly attempting to land on a perfectly polished hood, but he had bigger fish to fry. He had a department to run, a community to protect, and a hard-earned peace to savor. He wouldn't let Karen, with her binoculars and her judgmental gaze, steal a single ounce of the satisfaction he felt. But beneath his calm exterior, a quiet resolve was hardening. He knew with an instinct honed by years of police work that Karen wasn't just curious or nosy. She was building a narrative, and he had a worrying premonition that this narrative was quickly turning hostile. The simmering annoyance Anthony felt towards Karen's escalating antics finally boiled over one sun-drenched afternoon. He was out in the driveway, meticulously wiping down the cherry-red Ferrari, soft chamois gliding over its gleaming surface, when a shadow fell over him. He looked up to find Karen, not across the street with her binoculars, but standing a mere foot away, her arms crossed, a proprietorial smirk playing on her lips. She hadn't bothered with a pretense of a neighborly stroll. She had marched purposefully up his driveway, her eyes fixed on the car like a predator on its prey. Without a word, she extended a hand adorned with a large costume jewelry ring. "Pat!" and rapped her knuckle sharply against the hood of the Ferrari. The dull thud resonated, a jarring intrusion into Anthony's quiet peace.
8.
It was a disrespectful, audacious gesture, a challenge. "This," she declared, her voice surprisingly loud and self-assured, "belongs to the community. A vehicle of this caliber, in a neighborhood like ours, should be shared. It certainly doesn't belong to any one person, especially not a public servant." Anthony slowly straightened, his rag still clutched in his hand. His usual calm demeanor, honed by years of dealing with agitated citizens, was tested. The audacity of the woman was breathtaking. "Excuse me, Karen," he said, his voice level, betraying none of the irritation that tightened his jaw. "This car belongs to me, legally, fully paid for. It's a personal vehicle, not a public asset, and certainly not a community toy." He emphasized legally and fully paid with a subtle, deliberate weight, hoping to shut down her baseless claims. Karen's smirk faltered, replaced by a scowl. "Paid for? By what, Sheriff? Taxpayer money? Contributions? I'm sure the good people of Fairhaven would be very interested to know how a civil servant can afford such a decadent display. It's an insult to hard-working citizens, frankly." Her voice had risen in pitch, attracting the attention of a dog. Walker across the street, who quickly averted his gaze and sped up. "My finances are my own business, Karen," Anthony stated, his patience wearing thin. "And they're above board as anyone in this department, or indeed anyone who cares to look at my public records, would tell you. This car is a personal purchase, earned through decades of dedicated service," he wanted to add, "unlike your constant meddling," but he resisted. He was a sheriff, not a petty brawler. She didn't like that. Not one bit. Her face reddened, and a vein pulsed visibly in her temple. "We'll see about that, Sheriff," she spat, her eyes narrowed to slits. "Some of us believe in proper accountability. Some of us believe this neighborhood deserves better." Then ... this. With a final, disdainful look at the Ferrari, she spun on her heel and marched off his property. Her exit as dramatic as her entrance. Anthony watched her go, a sense of foreboding settling in his stomach. This wasn't just nosy neighbor stuff anymore. This was a direct, aggressive challenge, fueled by something deeper than simple envy. He knew Karen was capable of petty complaints, but this felt different, more insidious. The next morning, his fears were confirmed. He was an early riser, routine dictating his days. At precisely 6:30 a.m., just as the first slivers of dawn were painting the sky in hues of soft pink and gray, his internal monologues about his upcoming patrol schedule were interrupted by a subtle notification from his security system. His phone buzzed, alerting him to movement in his driveway. He glanced at the feed from his dashcam, which doubled as a driveway monitor when parked. The familiar figure of Karen was there, shrouded in the pre-dawn gloom, pacing back and forth in front of the Ferrari. She wasn't just pacing. She was circling it like a shark, her silhouette pausing intermittently. He watched a cold dread creeping up his spine as she reached out, her fingers brushing the driver's side door handle. Then she tried it. A soft click sound captured by the camera's sensitive microphone confirmed it. She tried the passenger door. Another click, her head craned, peering into the tinted windows, her face a ghostly smudge in the low light. She even tried the back of the car, her movements furtive, almost furtive. Then, as if emboldened by the lack of immediate repercussion, she moved towards the garage door, peering into the small gap at the bottom before pressing her hand against the rolling metal. Anthony's blood ran cold. This wasn't just curiosity. This was an attempted invasion, a clear violation of his property and his privacy. He thought about confronting her, stepping out in his robe and demanding she leave, but something held him back. I had a gut feeling that this wasn't the end, that she was building to something, and he needed to see what her next move would be. He recorded the footage, saved it to a secure drive, and then, with a heavy sigh, went about his morning preparations. The image of Karen's determined, intrusive actions burned into his mind. This was no longer just about a car. It was about a fundamental disregard for boundaries, for ownership, and increasingly for the law. What she did next, however, truly crossed every line. The chime of his doorbell, sharper than usual, sliced through the morning quiet. Sheriff Anthony Reed, already in his crisp uniform, badge gleaming, was knotting his tie in front of the hallway mirror when his wife Evelyn paused her own morning routine. "Expecting someone, hun?" she asked, her voice a little too light. Anthony shook his head, a frown creasing his brow. A moment later, the distinctive sound of approaching sirens, still faint but growing, drifted into the house. 2 sets of sirens, not 1. A patrol car, maybe 2, responding to what? Then a chilling thought struck him, cold not forming in his stomach. Karen. He stepped onto his porch just as the first patrol car, and the second, pulled up, their blue and red lights painting the neighborhood in a pulsing, surreal glow. The quiet morning was shattered. From the first cruiser, a young officer, barely out of the academy, stepped out. Officer Miller, Anthony recalled, a good kid, eager to learn. As Miller's eyes landed on Anthony, standing tall and imposing in his full uniform, badge shining, the Ferrari's cherry red gleam impossibly bright behind him, the young man visibly froze, initially set with professional determination, transformed into a mask of pure, unadulterated embarrassment. His jaw slackened, and he seemed to shrink inside his uniform. The second officer, a seasoned veteran named Detective Harding, emerged from the passenger side, his expression more guarded, but equally surprised. He immediately recognized Anthony, offering a quick, respectful nod. Anthony, ever the picture of calm authority, took a deep breath. "Morning, officers," he greeted, his voice steady, betraying none of the swirling frustration within him. "Seems to be the trouble?" Officer Miller stammered, shuffling his feet. Sheriff Reed? Sir? We, received a 911 call. Report of a suspicious individual in possession of stolen property." He gestured vaguely towards the Ferrari, then back to Anthony, his eyes darting frantically between them. And that the individual, the suspect, threatened the caller when asked about it. He looked like he wanted the ground to swallow him whole, his cheeks flushing crimson. Every word was a struggle, each sentence more mortifying than the last. The absurdity of it hung heavy in the air, just as Miller was fumbling through his explanation. Karen herself emerged from behind the second patrol car, having evidently flagged them down as they approached. She walked up to the scene with a smug, self-satisfied smile plastered across her face. Her arms crossed triumphantly, as if she were the hero of a dramatic narrative she had personally orchestrated. Her eyes narrowed and gleaming, locked onto Anthony, a clear gotcha moment radiating from her entire being. She was ready to deliver the final crushing blow she believed she had set up so perfectly. "Well, officers," Karen began, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness, "it's about time. This man," she gestured dramatically at Anthony, "has been quite hostile about that car. He claims it's his, but it's clearly stolen. And when I merely inquired about it, acting as a concerned citizen, mind you, he became quite aggressive." She paused, expecting the young officers to immediately side with her, to turn their attention and their accusations onto Anthony. She was painting a picture of righteous indignation, a helpless neighbor wronged by an arrogant, possibly corrupt sheriff. Her performance was almost Oscar-worthy in its theatricality. Anthony stood his ground, observing her, a dangerous calm. Settling over him, he was no longer just annoyed.
Ow!
He was furious. This wasn't merely a false report. This was an attempt to weaponize the very system he represented against him, a blatant abuse of emergency services fueled by prejudice and entitlement. He knew, with absolute certainty, that Karen's carefully crafted fantasy was about to shatter, and he was ready to watch it crumble. The stage had been set, the players were in position, and Karen, in her blind arrogance, had no idea she was about to face a curtain call very different from the one she envisioned. The true shocking moment, however, was still moments away, poised to expose far more than just a false accusation. The air thrummed with a palpable,